Today, we're going to dive into a topic that I feel is one of the most important topics for people to understand if they are brand new in a trauma healing journey, a personal development journey, or an entrepreneurial journey. But in reality, everybody needs to know this, and the stats that I'm going to share with you are pretty mind-blowing. Welcome to Brain Body Speak, the podcast that bridges the worlds of psychology, somatic healing, neuroscience and energetics, as well as holistic health. I'm Holly Joy McCabe, here to help you understand complex topics by breaking them down into straightforward concepts and practical examples so you can understand your brain, your body, your nervous system, and your conscious and subconscious mind. The knowledge you'll find in this show will be your secret weapon as you learn the language of health, happiness, and success. We'll dive deep into unique perspectives on topics like mental and physical health, mindset, trauma healing, and so much more, offering you actionable tools and insights to transform each area of your life. And hey, if you're a business owner or CEO looking for all of these topics specifically catered to entrepreneurship, make sure to check out my other show, The Regulated CEO. Let's dive in. So the topic is self-awareness. And to set the stage for you to understand exactly why this is such an important topic and one that I'm so passionate about, I'm going to share with you this stat. Only an estimated 10 to 15% of people actually have true self-awareness, yet 95% of people think that they do. The irony in that is not lost on me, so trust me, that stat alone, it blows my mind, but at the same time, it really doesn't, because what I've seen in years of working with people is twofold. One, a lot of times I'll work with a woman in a relationship, or I'm working with the woman in the family, and without fail, there's typically some type of relationship dynamic that's playing into the mix, right? She has a lot of self-awareness, or she believes she does, and it's really easy to think the other person is the problem. They have all the issues, all of the, I can point my finger at every single thing they're doing wrong, and if they would just do this, then I would be fine. And through the process, without ever having to hold a mirror up, as we start working on them and getting them tuned in and slowed down and working on themselves and truly developing self-awareness, magically, their relationships dramatically improve. So that's just one simple example, but oftentimes the least self-aware people are the ones who actually think they're self-aware. And that self-awareness is often I'm so good at figuring out how everybody else triggers. That is not self-awareness either. So let's dive into some of the basics of self-awareness, why I think this is so important, and really get into the nuts and bolts of how do we actually cultivate real self-awareness? Why is it so important? And how does it really benefit our professional, personal lives, our mental and physical health, and the way we exist in the world? So let's dive in. A couple stats that I'm going to read here in my show notes are, again, I already talked about the one of only 15%, maybe, are truly self-aware. 95% believe that they are. So the other interesting fact about this, which plays into self-awareness, is the majority of people overestimate their strengths and downplay their weaknesses. Now, I could literally in the show right here and now, I can tell you, if you just take that one piece of information to the bank and apply it to yourself or your understanding of those around you, it's going to change everything. So if we think we're self-aware, but we're not, and then we overestimate our strengths, but downplay our weaknesses, what do we have? What do we have? We have a recipe for disaster. We have a recipe for no matter how many self-development books you read or how many therapists you see or how many, immersive transformational retreats you go on, that stuff is just going to roll off your back like water on a duck's back. It's not going to stick. It's not really going to permeate, and you're not going to be able to integrate into any of it. In the alternative health space, especially the kind of more spiritual, esoteric space of plant medicine, or even the clinical side of psilocybin therapies, one of the most studied components is the integration after a plant medicine journey and how important that is. What psilocybin and these altered states do is they kind of open the lid, they sort of crack open that ability to have that deeper subconscious self-awareness. But that lid closes when the psilocybin is out of your system. So if you're not doing anything with that, if you don't really have the support and the guidance long term to implement strategies and behavioral changes over the long run, you're not making any change. And I see this so often, and I talk about this a lot because I think the plant medicine spiritual space is some of the most destructive and pathological sort of attempts at healing and change that are out there. And that's a whole other podcast. But that's a good example that even when we have these moments where maybe the lid opens and we have these epiphanies or self-awareness or, oh my gosh, that makes sense. Yes, that's because of my childhood trauma. What does any of that information mean if we don't have a plan and a course of action to actually heal, integrate, resolve, and then move forward in a better way after the fact? So this is the difference between just having self-awareness and actually moving forward. So it's like no self-awareness, self-awareness, but then there's that additional step, right? So hopefully I'm painting a picture for the different stages and elements, and then again, why this is so important. So a couple other things that are really interesting is people misattribute their own behavior. So there's a former CIA agent that I absolutely love. Her name is Evie. She's incredible. I love her energy. I love her attitude. She's so blunt. She's so to the point. And I absolutely love listening to her when I am a little bit too in my feelings or emotions or in victimhood or in woe is me land, which admittedly is something that can happen pretty easily with me, especially with my chronic illness and a lot of the barriers I have there. There's this slippery slope for me if I get too much in that. And being in the trauma space and the embodiment somatic space, sometimes I think that pendulum really swings the far other direction of feel your feelings and just all the things. And then there's the really, really other extreme of the self-help, personal development, discipline side that completely bypasses. So as I often say, oftentimes you have to find this intermedium and kind of oscillate in and out of both sides. But when I need more of that like discipline, get out of your feelings, Holly, pull it together, Evie is the one. She is so incredible. And something that she talks about, being a former CIA agent and doing a lot of different kind of high profile jobs and roles in government security and different things, she mentions having interviewed a lot of really bad people that have done a lot of really horrible things, from murder to lesser crimes. And the striking thing that she says is they all sold it to themselves. What does that mean? They justified and rationalized their behavior to be able to actually do that behavior. Or on the other side, they didn't have this guilt and remorse and this, oh my gosh, why did I do that? They had 1 + 1 = 2. That's why I did it. It's because of this. They sold it to themselves. And I thought that was so telling, because any of us who aren't criminals could look at that and think, wow, that's crazy. Somebody could murder somebody and justify it. They really lack self-awareness, right? But what are we doing in our lives that we're rationalizing, that we're justifying, that we're bypassing, that we're not actually looking at, or we're looking at it through our own filtered, self-appeasing lens? And that's really what my work is all about, is it's getting past those superficial layers that are really just automatic behaviors, protective responses, and these developed layers of protection that tell you this is how you act, this is how you are, and this is just how it is. That's your subconscious. That's your nervous system. Those are those autopilot programs that keep you stuck in those states that stop you from ever seeing those deeper layers. And this is why working with somebody truly having somebody hold your hand and keep you accountable and guide you through a healing process that's not always comfortable and it's not always pretty is really, really, really the key. Some of the most dysregulated, dysfunctional, chaotic, and pathological people I have ever met have read every personal development book out there. And they actually oftentimes have a lot of external success. But they are the type of people that when you're around them for 5 minutes, you're like, you're such an asshole. You are like plowing over people. You're rude to the waiter. You're so disconnected from reality. You're very grandiose. I mean, I've dealt with this a lot being in the entrepreneur success, personal development space. And you see that a lot. So those people, they have that surface level information. They could tell you everything from Buddhist concepts to, they can cite every Tony Robbins quote. They have the information in that conscious brain, a lot of it actually. And they spout it out very, very confidently. These people are often very, very oftentimes charismatic. And again, they're successful. But when you're around them for 5 minutes, you're like, you do not embody Buddhist principles. You actually are kind of missing the boat on that thing that you teach and preach. And I've just experienced that a lot. It's what made me pull away from those worlds for many, many years, as I found there was an incongruence. And the deeper I went into psychology and healing and developing my own method through my own healing process, the more I realized, again, that information just in that upper part, that prefrontal cortex part of your brain, and knowing the things is just such a tiny % of the equation. It's great to know that stuff, but if you're not going through practices to actually integrate and change the brain, change the nervous system, change the mind and the triggers and the automatic responses and the subconscious mind, if you're not going to all of those layers, then it's almost like that 95% gets more dysfunctional because it's being fed by that 5% delusion. And that's where, again, you see that disconnect with how somebody shows up online or this facade that they put on. But then when you meet them in person, you're like, wait a minute, something's not right here. So to me, I think that paints a good example of the lack of self-awareness in people. It's simple. Again, most of us have experienced that, even if it's not with some big influencer or a leader. It might be somebody in your church or your community who on the surface presents as one thing, but when you're around them, you're like, whoa. A lot of very religious people, I think, also embody that. But I digress. Let's continue diving into the elements of self-awareness. And I think we've got a pretty clear grip on what the problem is. What the missing link is that integration. So how do we actually develop that? So the other thing that people will say a lot of times when they think they have self-awareness is it's really about noticing their past behavior. They think if they can tell you what they did, that's self-awareness. That's not self-awareness. A monkey or a child could do that. True self-awareness is really about understanding the thought process, your emotional triggers, and the subconscious patterns driving those behaviors. When people say, when they're rationalizing their behavior, they think that this is self-awareness by saying, that's just my personality. I took Myers-Briggs personality test and I'm an INFJ and that's what I do and that explains everything. That's also not self-awareness, because one of my famous quotes that I say all the time is you have a lot less of a personality than you think, meaning it's not a fixed state. It's, again, those learned behaviors and patterns. They'll say, this is a big one, that is why I pulled away from the trauma space, and I feel like I never really fit in that community, is because understanding your trauma, verbally processing your trauma, having the awareness of how it shaped your behaviors and who you are today is one thing, and that's a part of the healing process. Wearing those titles and those labels and identifying it with it and inviting it in to get cozy and have a kumbaya every single day with every single action, and being so attached to it that you either don't ever try to change or aren't able to change is a completely different thing. And I find a lot of people, the deeper they go in the trauma space, the more they're just looking to connect dots to honestly get a dopamine hit on, yeah, I went through this trauma and this is why this happens. Yep. And I was told to be quiet when I was a kid. And that's why I did this. And what actually is happening there is they're not only getting dopamine from that validation and chasing the labels, but they're also staying in a state of inaction because they have an excuse. I just had all this trauma and that's why I do this. And I'm afraid of public speaking. And they can just get so wound up in that story and that justification that it's my trauma response and it's because of my trauma and it's because of my childhood that they excuse themselves from all personal responsibility and accountability. And that, I think, is one of the biggest missing links in traditional trauma containers and traditional trauma modalities. A therapist is not able to even tell you, really give you that harsh feedback or give you course corrections. And that's why the coaching therapy hybrid model, or oscillating or doing both, or, going from one to the other, is so important if it's the right coach, because you need to understand and then you need to be able to move forward. So the whole trauma as a justification and an explanation, and if the other one there is neurodiversity, yes, it's incredible to learn that you have a brain that functions differently, and it's kind of amusing and you feel validated and you feel like, wow, yeah, I have ADHD and that's why I do this. But oftentimes you're not doing anything to optimize the way your brain functions and to work with that and to make the best of the situation. You just get deeper and deeper into the justifications and the explanations. So having self-awareness is more than knowing that you have the behavior or being able to explain what the behavior is. It's the why, the how, and then how do I optimize it? Astrological signs, another one. If that's your thing and you're really into that, I totally understand. I know a lot of people are. I know I'm a Capricorn and I know a few basic traits about that. That's never really resonated with me. And I've certainly never justified my behavior or the things that were happening because of what was happening in the planetary systems.
Hey there, it's Holly Joy. Really quick, I want to take a moment of your time to tell you about something really important. You know, this show is all about diving into the science behind health, happiness, and success. And I want to tell you about something that really impacts all of us: stress. We're living in a world where stress levels are through the roof, and it's no wonder that so many of us are feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, and just plain burnt out. But did you know there's a powerful, natural way to help your body handle stress better? The answer lies in a mineral you've probably heard of, but might be overlooking: magnesium. Magnesium is your body's secret weapon in the fight against stress. And it's essential for over 300 biochemical reactions in your body, including regulating your nervous system, supporting healthy sleep, and managing your stress levels. Unfortunately, most of us aren't getting nearly enough of it. And ironically, stress is the number one thing that depletes magnesium at rapid rates. So we're not getting enough, and then we're constantly stressed, losing the little we do get. And this leads to a whole host of issues. Increased anxiety, trouble sleeping, and that constant feeling of being on edge are all a result of not having adequate magnesium levels. So if you're not getting enough, your body can't function optimally. And that's where 300 Zens from Zen in a Bottle really comes into play. This isn't just any magnesium supplement. It's designed to be highly absorbable without any of the junk or fillers, so that your body can actually use it to support your nervous system, calm your mind, and help you get that restful sleep you so desperately need. So if you're tired of feeling stressed out and wired, it's time to give your body the support it deserves. Start with magnesium, the number one player in the game of stress management. Head over to zeninabottle.biz and grab your bottle of 300 Zens today. Use the code BrainBodySpeak at checkout for an exclusive discount only for our listeners. Because when it comes to your health, every little bit counts, and starting with magnesium might just be the game changer you've been looking for. Remember, your brain and body deserve the best, so let's make sure they're getting it. zeninabottle.biz, and don't forget the code BrainBodySpeak to save. Stay balanced, stay zen, and we're back to the show.
I believe that that's a thing, but I don't feel like it serves me to buy into that. and to look at Mercury is in retrograde, and so everything's going to go to shit. That's not self-awareness either. And that's just one more distraction that people oftentimes will cling to justify their situation, their lack of action, their behavior, etc. It's just the way I've always been. That's a big one. And then the last thing that I'll mention here, it's not in my notes, but this one comes to mind because this also comes up in the couples therapy model a lot, is you're trying to change me, and this is just who I am, and I just want you to accept me. Well, it may well be that this is how you've always been. And yes, partner A may want to change partner B's harmful, toxic, abusive behavior. But this person learned some therapy speak, and they are now weaponizing that of, you should love me for who I am, and you should just accept me for who I am. This is just who I am and how I operate. This person's over here is thinking, so I should just accept that you're abusive or you're harmful or you're hurting me? And then vice versa, that also can be flipped, where this person over here is so in their own pain and their own trauma that they're perceiving something way out of context. This person over here is like, I don't know how to change this or how to make this better for you because it seems like a you problem. And this person's actually the person that needs healed. So this is oftentimes why with couples therapy, it's not very effective because one or two of the partners typically lack self-awareness, or they're on completely different pages. They could tell you the situation at hand, and you're going to get such radically different versions of that story because each person is speaking from their trauma, their lenses, and their own perceived self-awareness. And that can be weaponized, or it can be a foundation with a good therapist of saying, hey, let's try to expand the perception on both sides so that we can maybe reach some middle ground where we both start to see this a little bit on the same page. And that's where the true therapeutic process for couples specifically really moves forward. So you can try all you want to make a round peg fit in a square hole with two different people that see things so incredibly different. But it rarely happens if you can't get to those deeper layers. And again, I think that's where traditional talk therapy for couples misses the boat catastrophically. So the brain naturally protects you from seeing your flaws. So if we're going to talk about, okay, we know people are not looking at their flaws. Why is that? Well, it's scary. It's painful. And what is your brain and your nervous system designed to do? To keep you safe, to keep you warm and cozy, to keep you protected from anything that's harmful. If you put your hand on a hot stove, it's going to say, move away from that, danger, danger. The same thing happens with any type of uncomfortable emotion or feeling or sensation if you lack the capacity to be with that. That is what nervous system regulation and capacity building is all about, which is a huge part of my process with clients. You have to build a container that can say, ugh, that's uncomfortable to look at that in myself. I don't like it, but I can handle it. And if I can handle it, then I can move towards it a little bit. I can feel it and see it and listen to it and filter through and pull out the good and maybe disregard the stuff that doesn't serve me, honor it, thank it, and then move forward with the plan of action on how to change that behavior or that default trait of mine. That's the key right there, right? We want to be able to move towards something that otherwise our natural response is to flee away from. And that right there just 100% sums it up why people lack self-awareness, because building self-awareness means you have to move into uncomfortable emotions. You have to feel triggered. You have to feel vulnerable. You have to feel judged or criticized or less than. And we spend our entire lives developing coping mechanisms and default modes of responses to avoid those things. And essentially, that's what narcissism is. There's a term called narcissistic injury, and it's well known to be the smallest slight to a true narcissist feels like the end of the world. And it will ignite narcissistic rage where, think about the worst thing you could possibly say to somebody, the most personal, the most cruel, vile, threatening. I won't even give you examples because it could go really dark. But think about that. being said to you and then your response, right? It would activate everything. Well, for a narcissist, that can be, hey, you put your shoes there and I've tripped over them several times. So if you could just put them in the basket out of the way. And that feels so personal that it erupts this narcissistic rage. You might get yelled at. If the person is physically abusive, it might result in that. It's very exaggerated. It's very severe. Why? Because that person has zero shame tolerance, zero criticism tolerance. And narcissism is a spectrum. You're not just born into this world a narcissist who doesn't feel things or who reacts that way. This is a learned thing, typically through childhood. And there's a lot of different theories there. We don't have time to go into that. But it's a spectrum. We all have narcissistic traits. And I'm just painting a picture that the more we run away from this stuff, the more narcissistic we are. And going back to the self-development example I gave you, again, those people, they get all this success and validation, and they kind of get this big head. And the more success and validation they get without doing that deeper work, the more vulnerable they become. So they have to build this like facade, this exterior circumstance where they don't feel anything. And that's why they can't connect with empathy. And that's why they're rude to the waiter and they don't really have this quality human element of I care about people, I see people, I make, ethical business decisions and so on. So narcissism is a spectrum, and it's something that's developed out of an inability to handle negative emotions, which is, again, oftentimes loneliness or isolation or rejection. And so these protective mechanisms kick in that say, I don't want to see it, I don't want to feel it, blinders, earmuffs, and just continue plowing forward. So we can all develop narcissistic traits. They can be activated in us. And the more we lack self-awareness, the higher up on the narcissistic scale we are. So if we want to be caring, self-aware, developed good people, then we have to be aware of that if we're avoiding those difficult conversations and those tough things, therapy, coaching, with conversations with the boss, the problems in the relationship, we're never going to move forward. In relationships, people will often, it's time for a divorce. I don't like these conversations. I don't like the way this person responds. They don't hear me, see me. I think they're crazy. I see it from my view. So on to the next person. And that person's still carrying those responses into the next relationship and the next and the next and the next if they don't actually do the deeper work. So to sum this up, we'll talk about genuine self-awareness, again, equals behavioral change. It's not just the knowing, it's the knowing and changing and doing. If it isn't leading to different choices, it's just self-analysis. And that's the difference. Self-analysis, self-reflection, self-awareness, those are all different things. Just like self-esteem, self-confidence, and self-love are different things. There's a lot of different selves out there, and they all hit a different component. So we want to recognize emotional triggers before they hijack your responses, before they've activated that whole sequence of events, and you're in fight or flight, negative response, like defensive land. You want to understand the subconscious behaviors driving your reactions. Now, this is the part where that deeper trauma excavation can be helpful in the beginning, but it doesn't have to be weeks and months and years of going over and over and over analyzing that. In fact, that just deepens the response and deepens the justification of this is why I do what I do. So I think, again, traditional therapy models really miss the boat with elongating the time that it gives people to verbally process through. And because they don't know how to use therapeutic tools to offload that energy from the brain and the body, from the nervous system, they are waiting to arrive to some point where the client feels resolved about the issue. But without those tools, that never happens. So when people come to me, they often say the exact same thing. I've been in talk therapy for years. I think it's working. I kind of feel a little better, but nothing's really changed. And I don't really know why I'm doing it. I just think that I should. There's very, very little tangible, measurable change because they're not being given the tools to actually get to the end point. In my sessions, we go 30 minutes. We analyze. We get straight to the point. What's the real core root? We might have a feeling, an emotion, a pattern, but we get really quickly to the root of that. And then we go straight to that and we work on that with targeted tools and modalities that can release, rewire, reframe, and reorganize all of that. That's why the change is so radical and why it's very fast. So choosing new intentional actions instead of running on autopilot, that's what true self-awareness leads to. So a couple things on how to start seeing your blind spots, especially if you're not able to work with somebody. You need to audit your patterns. What situations trigger your emotional responses, and what responses do you want to change the most that you see repeatedly coming up? If the same issues keep showing up, then that's your pattern. Again, it's not a one-off situation. It's like, whoa, this happens this way and this way and this way, and this has been a lifelong thing. And then again, if you can't work with a practitioner, a therapist, a coach in this space, find a trusted friend, a family member who can maybe give you some feedback, because the people closest to you, if they're really being honest, they will tell you the things that you cannot see yourself. And you have to be willing to take that and own it, integrate the information and process it and work with it instead of getting reactive, dismissive, and making it personal and making it ruin the relationship. You have to go in with a very open mind and an open heart and make that a safe place for that person to give that feedback. So test new responses as the final step. You don't want to just analyze, you want to interrupt the cycle and see what changes. And this is where the gradual change over time. It's reps and sets. You have to keep doing the thing until suddenly it's your new default mode. So final thought, self-awareness, it's not just collecting reasons for why you do what you do, but it's actively shifting your behavior. You're just really good at explaining your patterns if you think you have self-awareness, but you actually don't. If you really have self-awareness, you're going to be looking at things on a deeper level and then taking a multifaceted approach and having measurable success within a certain period of time. And the final note I'll say on that is the measurable success and the timeline. One of the biggest traps that people get in, and I feel like I am saying a lot about talk therapy, but I just have to be real and acknowledge the deficits in that modality, because myself and hundreds of people I've worked with have experienced this. But in that modality, that elongation of the verbally processing and the talking about all the things and understanding it and, oh, this is the why, that is a perfect excuse for someone to say, I'm working on myself. I'm working on myself. I've spent years in therapy. I'm working on myself. And again, on that narcissistic scale, a lot of times people will weaponize that and use it to elevate themselves against someone in an argument. Well, my therapist said, or I learned in therapy that, when you say this, it triggers my childhood memories, or I'm in therapy, so I know. You have all the information, you have all the terms, but you lack the ability to actually go deeper. So the final trap that I think talk therapy leads people to is this pseudo, I'm healing and I'm working on it. Would you go to a nutritionist or a trainer for 5 years and you never took a progress picture, you never weighed yourself, you never took measurements, you never did a strength test to know your base levels, and you were blindfolded the whole time, but you kept showing up and you're like, I'm working on getting in shape. I'm working on it. I'm working on it. At some point, you would want to have some measurable metric to be able to say, it's slow progress, but this is changing and this is getting better. That's not only logical, but that's what feeds the neurology and the neurochemical reactions of success and change, because you need that positive reward, dopamine, to actually keep you moving forward. So that's how people can get locked into their personal development or their fitness journey or their trauma healing journey, is when they start to see that positive reward, and that feels good. It's validated and it's like, whoa, that's a better response. I can navigate these conversations so much easier. This is good. Let me keep this up. If you don't have that, you got nothing. So don't get caught in the trap of, I listen to therapy podcasts and all the books and I see a therapist and I do all the things, but my life is exactly the same. If your life is exactly the same and nothing's really changing and you've done it for a significant amount of time, and I would say a significant amount of time isn't 5 years. It's honestly within a month you should see positive changes in a therapeutic process. unless you are deep, deep, deep in some heavy trauma, but you should every week be getting your head a little bit more above water. I measure everything, so this is tracked in my process. And from week 1, things are dramatically getting lower, 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 lower. We measure physical symptoms, emotional symptoms, all the things. I don't wait 6 months and tell my clients, well, we're working on it. We're working on it. It's like, no tangible proof. So understand that even though change is a long-term thing and it's a lifetime commitment, just like health and fitness, you should also be feeling better each time you show up and do the work. Each week, each month. It shouldn't have this timeline of it just takes forever to get better. So understand that if you've been caught in that trap of I'm working on it, I think it's getting better, I'm trying, you got to go deeper. You got to really go beyond this illusion of self-awareness, and you got to actually make the changes. So that is all I have for now. I hope this unlocks some insights for you. As always, I would love to hear your feedback, what resonated with you. Shoot me a message on Instagram. Leave a review. Share this with a friend if you feel like this could open up a conversation. It means so much to me to hear your feedback and to open these conversations within my community. So I love hearing from you. I love seeing things shared out, and it means so much. So that is all for now. Until next time, take care. Thank you so much for tuning in to Brain Body Speak. If you found today's episode valuable, be sure to subscribe, share it with a friend, and please, please consider leaving a review so that more people can find the show and benefit from this content. It means the world to me. I read every single one of them, and it really encourages me to keep moving forward with this mission and this podcast. Also, tag me on Instagram at Brain Body Speak and let me know what resonated with you specifically about this episode, and you'll be entered into my monthly giveaway of a free $500 value Brain Body Reboot course. To take this journey further, visit brainbodyspeak.com for free resources and to see our complete suite of self-paced programs. If you're ready to start nourishing your brain and body today, snag something from my premium supplement line by visiting zeninabottle.biz. Remember, 300 Zens, our magnesium product, is my absolute fave and my #1 recommendation for people to get started. Until next time, remember, your transformation begins with your brain, your body, and your nervous system. And I hope you found value from this show that you can put into action today. Love and Zen. Until next time.